We'll now take a look at how we handle multiple selections by using nested if statements. The question now is, what if we need more than two alternatives? So we can use an if-else statement to pick one choice or another, but if we have multiple alternatives, we can use a second if-else statement as one or both of the true-false statements in our original if-else statement. So what we're saying is, instead of just having a single statement or a compound statement handle a true case or a false case, let's just throw in another if-else statement. So we can put an if-else statement inside of an if-else statement. So this is what's called a nested if statement. So let's take a look at an example of a nested if-else statement. So this is saying if x is greater than 0, we will print out the statement x is positive. So we'll print that using this line if this is true. But what if it's not true? No, then that means either x is less than 0 or it's equal to 0. So we can throw in an extra if-else statement in the entire else part. So we can put all that right here. So now if our original condition is not true, we just do another if-else statement. We say if x is less than 0, then we'll print out the line x is negative. But if that is false, then our only option is if x is not greater than 0 and x is not less than 0, then it must be equal to 0. So we can just print out the statement x is 0. Now, you may or may not have noticed that in our last example, we didn't use curly braces for that last else part. And this is because we can think of an if-else statement as one giant statement. So even though there could be compound statements within the true part or the false part, the whole thing can be considered a single statement. So that's why we can get away with it. Although I will say it's recommended to just go ahead and include the curly braces. That way it's very clear what is part of the true portion and what's part of the false portion. So this could lead to a question though, where which else goes with which if. If I have an if statement and then an else, and then I have an if else in there or an if else somewhere else, it can get kind of confusing about mapping an else statement with an if. Because remember, we can't have an else statement by itself. It must be paired with some if statement. So the way Java does it is it associates an else with the most recent incomplete if portion. So in other words, if the most recent if portion has not been paired with an else portion yet, we'll take whatever else we're currently looking at. Here is a more simplified example of the same code we just had before. So we're still saying if x is greater than 0, we say x is positive. If that's not true, then we check if x is less than 0, then we say it's negative, otherwise it's 0. This does the exact same thing as the previous code, except what we've done now is we're allowed to actually put an if statement with the else that goes with it. So we say this is else if. I mean, we could just technically put the if portion here on a separate line, which is what we had in the previous example. But this is just a way to kind of make it a little bit easier to read so we can kind of see which cases we're looking at. So in this example, you see there are clearly three different possible things that can happen. If the first condition is true, is when we do the first part. The second case happens where the first condition is false, but the second condition is true. And then the last line happens when both conditions are false. We'll take a look at one more example just to kind of help show how nested if else statements work. So this is a case where we use an if else statement in the true portion of our if else statement. So we have that part all done in here. So this is saying if our temperature is greater than or equal to 50, we throw in another if else statement. So then we say if the temperature is greater than or equal to 80, we would print that it's too hot. If this is false, well, it's still greater than or equal to 50, it's just now it's less than 80. So we would print out that it's just right. And then this else part right here corresponds with this if up here. So if temperature is less than 50, we're going to print it's too cold.